Greetings and welcome to 303. We are in Senior English A, and we now turn to the Shakespearean Sonnet 106 on page 275. I actually want to start at 2B really quickly. Obviously, we can point out really fast for your notes that this is a sonnet, 14 lines, iambic pentameter, a rhyme scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Of course, if you've already studied Sonnet 29 with me, we've already kind of covered some of this territory. What I want to start with at 2B, however, is the observation that this poem, Sonnet 106, and Sonnet 29 that we've just studied, and there it is above you on page 275, both have a certain kind of when, then construction. I'll say it again. When, then construction. By that we mean the following. Think about Sonnet 29. I'm making quickly now a 3A observation with another title. Think about in Sonnet 29 how he says, when I am really sad and low and blue, when I feel like a total loser, when I feel like I don't have any money, notice all those whens, then, he says, I think on my girl. So this is what I mean by a when, then construction. Now, we want to point out that this is a very popular form of sonneteering. And in fact, when we see, for example, Keats's, the great romantic poet, When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be, later in Senior English B, will point out the same kind of construction. All right, let's go to it. Sonnet 106. All I want to do to begin with is let's just read the thing. Again, my hope is that while you are working with these poetic lines, you have the ability to be able to actually read this stuff and start to figure it out on your own. So follow along, let your eyes follow along with mine, and let's take a look at it. Sonnet 106. When in the Chronicle of wasted time, I see descriptions of the fairest ways, and beauty making beautiful old rhyme in praise of ladies dead and lovely knights, then in the blazon of sweet beauty's best of hand, of foot, of lip, of eye, of brow, I see their antique pen would have expressed even such a beauty as you master now. So all their praises are but prophecies of this our time, all you prefiguring. And, for they looked but with divining eyes, they had not skill enough your worth to sing. For we which now behold these present days have eyes to wonder, but lack tongues to praise. Now, this is an interesting poem because it's going to argue that there is something different about now than back then. That is to say, in the past. All right? So let's work through this poem at level 1. Let's take a few notes. Let's try and figure out what is Shakespeare saying about his girl now. Earlier in Sonnet 29, for example, he said, when I think about my girl, I get really happy. He's going to make a different observation about his girl this time. And it's going to have something to do with history, so let's take a look. Notice he says, when in the Chronicle of wasted time, let's just go ahead and put it in our notes. What would that be? The Chronicle of wasted time would simply mean the past. That is to say, history. The people who wrote before me. Who were they writing about? Here, you might put in your notes that he possibly is thinking about the great Italian poet Petrarch, right? In other words, Petrarch was always writing about beautiful women. Notice, I see descriptions of the fairest wise. In other words, people. Okay? In other words, the fairest people, the most beautiful people. In other words, let's write it down in the second line. He says it this way. In the past, poets like Petrarch were always writing about beautiful women. Always writing about beautiful people, beautiful women. And beauty making beautiful old rhyme. Line 3. And praise of ladies dead and lovely knights. Then in the blazon, your footnote there, right? The catalog, the listing of all the beautiful things about them. Of sweet beauty's best. And then what is it that poets are always wanting to celebrate? Think about bad country songs. I love to point this out. We don't have bad country song lyrics unless we have Shakespeare sonnets. What is it bad country songs? Well, truly, any kind of love song is always going to emphasize. They're going to emphasize the hand. Do you see it at line 6? The foot. That means, by the way one walks. The lip. That is to say, the face. The eye. The brow, that is to say, the face, right? He says, in the past, when women were described as beautiful, then obviously they had to describe them in regards to those things. poets wrote about beautiful women in the past. Notice he says, I see their antique pen, antique here meaning old, would have expressed even such a beauty as you, master. Now, whoa, so let's get to it. What he's saying now is, they wrote about it in the past. I'm looking at it in the present. Let's write that down. That is an easy level 1 observation. They wrote about it, beauty, beautiful women in the past. Now I'm looking right at it. Not only me, but everybody else. We'll get to that one in a second. So all their praises are but prophecies of this our time. All you prefiguring. In other words, he says, I mean, it's pretty simple. Now all of a sudden this poem starts to make a lot of sense. It's one thing to read a poem about a beautiful woman. It's another thing to actually see a beautiful woman. He says to his girl, hey, listen. In the past, they wrote poems about beautiful women because they wanted to imagine what a beautiful woman, really totally beautiful woman, looked like. Now he says, we're no longer in the past. Now we're in the present, and I'm looking at you, and you are stunning. Everything they wrote about was a prophecy or a prefiguring. In other words, a prediction. Let's write that word down for you. That's an easy one. A prediction of what would come. In other words, when Petrarch wrote about beautiful women, he was predicting you. Wow. He says about those people in the past, especially when I think maybe Petrarch. And, for they looked but with divining eyes, they had not skill enough your worth to sing. In other words, he says, it's a good thing you didn't live back in the time of Petrarch, because he wouldn't have had words good enough to be able to describe how beautiful you actually are. Oh, you can imagine some girl will say, God will say anything to get what he wants. The final lines, of course, are the couplet. Let's take a look at that one. For we, which now behold these present days, have eyes to wonder, but lack tongues to praise. Now this is a bit of irony, because notice Shakespeare is going to say, in the end, I got to be honest, I'm just like Petrarch. I can't find the words to describe the stunning physical beauty that you are. He says, Petrarch set us up to look for a woman as beautiful as you. We now see a woman as beautiful as Petrarch once wrote about, prefigured, prophesied about. But I don't have the words to really describe just how stunningly beautiful you actually are. Very interesting. Let's jump to 2a really quickly. What is a major message or theme of this poem for you? There are several possible answers here. One is that we are always looking in the present for what people described in the past. Think about the last time you looked at a picture, like for example a painting or something like that. I mean, obviously you can think about the 274 painting or picture right there, right there next to you. It's just a kind of classic example, right? Or even if you jumped over onto page 277, do you see that little picture on 277? Amelia Bassano, do you see that picture of Amelia Bassano? Go ahead and look at it real quickly. That woman on 277, Amelia Bassano, that woman, that's a painting of a woman who was once considered stunningly beautiful. Now, oftentimes what happens is when you look at a woman like that, she's considered hot for her time. Most of you will say, yeah, pretty sure that's not hot. See, it's an interesting thing. We're always looking in the present for the descriptions of beauty from the past. In other words, somebody writes about it in the past or whatever, and then we try and see it in the present moment. Okay, so one possible message or theme is that the way beauty is constantly the search, the quest. Let's go ahead and write that one down. Beauty is always the quest in aesthetics, right? We're always looking for what is most stunning, what is most beautiful. But let's also write down this as a potential message. Beauty defies language. We might even call it as translinguistic. We can't really always give language to describe a truly beautiful event or a beautiful person. What makes a beautiful person, right? Notice he finishes by saying, I just don't have the words really, the tongue words to praise this. I don't know how to do it. I can't do what he says any better than probably Petrarch did it way back when. All right, let's talk 2b really quickly. Obviously, we already said it. This is a notice. When type of construction, right? Notice he says, in the past they wrote about it. Now I'm dealing with it by looking at you in the present. And I can't come up with any better language than those cats in the long time ago were able to do it. Okay? We obviously are dealing with a sonnet here. No question about that as well. We can put that at 2b if we haven't already done it. Let's jump to 3a really quickly. This is a poem that suggests that people think of beauty different in the present than they did in the past. Do you have a film that comes to mind that tries to define what true beauty is? Of course, one of the classic films, and we're always writing down Disney movies, aren't we? One of the classic films for a lot of you in your youth was that film Beauty and the Beast. And the minute that you even hear the title, you immediately remember certain parts of the film. But what's often lost on children, that now if I make the observation to you as you're grown up, you'll go, yeah, you're right. What is beauty in the Beauty and the Beast? Our initial response, of course, is it's the girl. The girl is the beauty, and the guy is the ugly. But the real question of the text, Beauty and the Beast, and of course Disney didn't invent it, it was around long before them, is the question of what is beautiful and what is ugly has less to do with physical and more to do with what's on the inside. That is to say, attitudes, emotions, that kind of thing, right? What for you is a film that suggests that there is physical beauty and then there's another kind of beauty? A beauty that's even more important, we might say. Do you have a film that suggests that? Do you have a song that suggests that? A lot of us listen to music. Do you have a music video that brings that to mind? That basically the message is, physical beauty is not the most important beauty. There's another kind of beauty that's way more important. You maybe were raised, let's jump to 3b now. You maybe were raised by people who said, beauty on the outside is not what's important, it's beauty on the inside. It's that beauty of personality. It's that beauty of character. It's that beauty of personality that says, I want to be a beautiful person in the way I act and treat others. What are your thoughts about this notion of beauty? Let's ask a couple of questions. Question 1, do you think of yourself as beautiful? And if, by the way, your first answer to that is absolutely no way, then notice how you maybe even missed the observation that we just made. When I ask, do you think of yourself as beautiful, most of you will respond by saying, when I look in a mirror and I see the reflection back, are you asking me if I think of that reflection as beautiful? But notice we just pointed out, well, there's beauty of the other kind. Why do you think it is the case that very regularly people think themselves ugly instead of beautiful? Where does that come from? That what we might call self-doubt. Where does that come from? Because in most people's lives, they were not told they were ugly, right? And yet they somehow internalized that notion. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not good looking enough. What about this question for you? Do you think it's true that beauty changes over time? What is, for example, beautiful in the 80s in movies became by the early 21st century, really? What was up with the hairs? Like, seriously? What was up with that? Do you think it's possible that the people who are considered stunningly beautiful today, we think, for example, of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, people who are considered physically beautiful today, do you think there will be a time in the future when people will look at those guys and go, ooh, what was wrong with them? Does beauty, in other words, over time change? Or does it somehow seem to remain the same? A beautiful person is a beautiful person regardless. Do you think beauty has anything to do with culture? So in other words, one culture sees beauty in one way, another culture sees a beautiful person in a completely different way, or is it rather universal? In other words, beautiful people are known to be beautiful people all the world around. For example, think about beauty pageants as a classic example. Think about, for example, supermodels as an example. These are models that end up on magazine covers all around the world. They can appear in Japan, they can appear in China, they can appear in Africa, they can appear in the United States, they can appear in Argentina, they can appear in Brazil. And on every magazine, the same person will be accorded a supermodel. Beautiful. Does this seem to suggest that everyone has the same view of beauty? Or rather, does it seem to suggest that people decide, a small group of people decide what is beautiful, put them on magazine covers, and then everybody else looks at that and says, That must be beauty. That's what I want to look like. What is true beauty? Very interesting question. Well, there you go. Sonnet 106. I hope that you can be prepared for the examination with our analysis. Thank you.